The evening has settled into its softest register, the hour when lamplight gathers in corners and every sound grows round and small. You ease open the door of the old bookstore by the river, and it greets you with a mild wooden creak, as if the hinge has learned to speak politely over many years. Warmth slips out to meet you. Inside a fire is cracking in the hearth, its gentle pops and soft sighs arranging the room's quiet into a comforting rhythm. You pause on the threshold, letting your ears widen first. Floorboards offer a cushioned murmur beneath your step. A linen-shaded lamp hums faintly in the background, the most modest glow. From somewhere beyond the shelves, the river's voice threads in through a slightly opened transom, a steady, silvery murmur. You take a breath and answer the room with a quieter pace. Good evening, you say, in a tone that fits the hush. No reply is required. The space acknowledges you with warmth and amber light. Edmund slips out of his coat, settles a woolen blanket across his shoulders, and moves toward the high-backed chair by the hearth, the one whose polished arms have a soft shine where many hands have rested. The cushion receives your weight with a gentle exhale, a fabric sigh that seems to approve your arrival. On the low table sits a rounded ceramic teapot, off-white and simple, the glaze crazed with charming hairline webs. Beside it, a little handwritten note. Chamomile and honey on the lower shelf. The words look like an invitation to a ritual you've practiced before. You smile without showing teeth and kneel at the small service cart tucked by the chair. Paper packets hush against each other as you select the chamomile, and the lid of the teapot answers your touch with a soft ceramic click. Steam rises when water meets blossoms, a feather-fine hiss that swells into the air and dissolves. You place the knit cozy over the pot and return to listening. All around, shelves climb into the dim rafters, their spines like a choir of lowered voices. The fire speaks in tiny sparks. A coal settles and ticks against the grate. Page edges shift somewhere. Not seen a mild paper rustle the library breathing. You notice how the river harmonizes with the hearth, one flowing, one glowing. Together, they steady your chest, and unspool the day's tightness. Edmund reaches into his satchel and draws out a cloth-bound book. The cover is bottle green with softened corners, velvet smooth from years of light handling. When you open it, the binding makes a gentle threadbare sound as if stretching after a nap. Pages turn with a small hush, the dry whisper of paper that knows how to wait. You read a line or two. The sentences take their time and invite yours to do the same. A lock shifts and taps the andiron, a polite wooden knock. You stand cross the worn rug and lift the brass poker. Metal touches metal with a clear, tiny note before you nudge the log into a more generous angle. The coals respond brightening to a cherry glow. The fire answers with a warmer crackle, not loud, but content like someone clearing their throat before speaking softly. You return the poker to its cradle and let the little ring fade back into the room's plush quiet. Back in the chair, the blanket rises a touch higher on your shoulders. The lamp's glow leans over your book and does not flicker. The river continues its sentence without interruption. Every sound feels rounded, as if sanded smooth by time. Your body notices and follows. Shoulders lower, jaw loosens, breath spreads out. The tea is ready. You lift the teapot, savoring its dependable weight, and pour. The stream makes a silver hush as it threads into the cup. A spoon chimes lightly against porcelain. You stir honey in soft circles. When you bring the cup to your lips, you can hear the smallest ring where china meets teeth. Almost not a sound at all. You taste warmth and flowers and a hint of sweetness that echoes tenderly in your chest. The after sound is silence, thick, kind, and present. You let your attention drift outward to the room's little orchestra. The hearth plays lead crisp, pop velvet crackle low glow. The river keeps time beneath it. The page you left open gives a slow exhale as it begins to close, then decides to remain where it is. Somewhere above, a timber thinks for a moment and settles with a soft, agreeable groan. None of it asks anything of you. These sounds are caretakers. Edmund marks a page with a brass leaf bookmark and closes the book to rest his eyes. The cover's fabric breathes against your palm as it meets itself. You place the book on the table and sit back, letting the wool blanket's quiet friction whisper against your sweater. Your breath begins to match the river for a few cycles, then the fire for a few more. You listen to each separately, the river alone, then the fire alone, then both together again. A subtle draft drifts through the transom and touches your cheek. The window answers with the faintest shiver glass murmuring inside its wooden frame. The sound is not interruption. It is variation, like a softer instrument joining an already gentle piece. Night on the river has its own volume, always moderate, always measured. You consider a small task the kind that calms by being very easy. On the shelf by the hearth, 3 volumes lean into one another. You rise and walk to them. Each footstep is a soft beat on the rug. You slide the first book upright. Cloth skims cloth. The second releases with a forgiving whisper. The third settles with a padded thump that feels like a cushion being fluffed. The line is orderly now, neither rigid nor careless. You nod to yourself, and the shelf seems to nod back. Returning to the chair, you cradle the cup again, lifting it, just to hear the porcelain murmur against its saucer as you set it down. You read a paragraph out loud in the voice of your mind. The words sound different in silence, tender, unhurried. Each comma becomes a landing, each period a restful shore. You pause mid-sentence, not because of meaning, but because the fire has offered a particularly pleasing series of tiny pops. You hold still to let them finish their thought. Edmund slides deeper into the chair, letting the cushion welcome your weight anew. The chair responds with a low wooden note approval, not complaint. The lampshade breathes a faint fabric rustle as the room's warm air shifts. Even your own swallow is part of the concert, a soft clicking pulse that confirms you are present and cared for. Another small plan, a fresh log for the hearth. You choose a modest one from the basket, a log with crisp bark that crackles in your hands like dry leaves. Kneeling, you lay it gently over the glowing bed, careful to keep space for air to travel. The room's sound changes subtly, a waiting hush. then the lightest hush of ignition, then the comfortable murmur that follows. You sit back and watch the shift with your ears as much as your eyes. The river carries on unbothered by your tasks, a metronome for calm. You can pick out different layers if you attend the quick chatter where water meets stone near the bank. The longer syllables through the deep channel, the soft feather noise as a breeze glides along its surface. Inside the fire answers with its own language of consonants and vowels, pops, hisses, soft breath. Together, they compose something that sounds like home, even if you've only just arrived. You refill your cup, not for thirst, but for the pleasure of the quiet pour. The teapot's base meets the trivet with the padded tap. The spoon makes a small ring that evaporates at once. You take a sip and set the cup down again, listening for the tiny, rounded click of china on china. The sound lands and disappears, leaving a trace that feels like a hand smoothing a wrinkle in a blanket. There is a clock somewhere behind the desk. You can't see it from here, but it confesses a small note now and then, less a tick than a softened exhale of metal. If it keeps time, it does so kindly. Time in this room seems to fold and cushion, to linger where the best sounds are, and skip lightly where the mind doesn't need to follow. Edmund lets the book remain closed. Your attention makes a slow circle of the space hearth window shelves, lamp chair cup. Each has a voice. Each belongs. Nothing is out of place, and nothing tries to be the center of anything. You soften with the recognition. The day outside, with all its sharper edges, is on the other side of this door. In here, each sound is a rounded stone in a quiet riverbed. The blanket warms at the shoulders. The chair learns your posture and adjusts with a whisper. Your breath continues to meet the room's tempo. In through the nose, out through the mouth, unforced. You lightly close your eyes and let the sounds do the seeing for a while. After several uncounted minutes, you open your eyes to the lamp's steady glow and the fire's soft braille of embers. The page where you left the brass leaf remains patient. You don't need to move yet. You can notice things you missed, the seam where the old floor meets the hearth's brick lip, the way the transom's latch hums with the breeze, the elegant, almost inaudible swish of the wool blanket when you shift your shoulder half an inch. little sounds that might be nothing anywhere else are everything here. You try a listening exercise, 3 breaths focused on the fire, 3 on the river, 3 on the whole room together. On the first pair, you hear the tiny grit of coals rearranging themselves. On the second, you catch the gentlest slap of water on stone. On the third, you hear both, plus something that includes them, a soft surrounding hush that seems to be the room's own heartbeat. You lean into that wider quiet and let it hold you. The cup calls you back with a mild tug of curiosity. You lift and sip, and the swallow lands with a satisfying little echo in your chest. You place the cup down carefully enough to earn the reward of that small porcelain kiss again. The comfort accumulates in layers of sound, each one barely there. All of them together, undeniable. Edmund considers time this time now not as a schedule, but as a companionable presence that sits beside the chair and listens too. You watch the fire's delicate choreography. An ember brightens, dims, brightens again. A sliver of bark curls and releases. The flame leans, recovers, leans. These are tiny dramas without any conflict. They ask for nothing but attention. Attention is easy to give. Your eyelids grow gentler at their hinges. The book will be waiting when you want words again. For now, the room speaks in its native language: wood, flame, paper, water, cloth, china. The vocabulary is small and perfect. The conversation is kind. You allow yourself to sink a little further, only enough to feel supported from all sides. The chair is a harbor. The blanket is a shoreline. The fire is a lantern. The river is a friendly narrator who never raises its voice. You listen for one more minute that stretches and softens and becomes several minutes without needing to be counted. Nothing needs changing. Nothing needs deciding. The bookstore knows how to care for an evening, and you know how to receive it. Sound is the bridge between the two, quiet, steady, and sure. Edmund rests in that confidence, eyes half-lidded, mouth, soft hands relaxed, heartbeat unhurried breath matched to the river and the fire and the lamp's thin filament hum. The day has nowhere to be. The night knows exactly where you are, and the room holds you perfectly still, perfectly safe, perfectly silent. The bookstore greets the senses in layers, but tonight its fragrances seem especially willing to tell their story. Edmund closes his eyes for a moment, letting the warm air settle around him. In the quiet smell becomes the narrator. First comes the hearth smoke that is sweet rather than sharp, a mellow perfume of oak logs releasing their slow glowing life. Next is the paper aged and softened by time, carrying the powdery scent of dry fibers and ink that has faded into memory. Beneath it all, the furniture gives off its own patient aroma. The polish of cedar, the faint resin of pine beams, holding the ceiling steady. And mingling throughout is the light floral presence of chamomile, still steeping gently in the ceramic teapot. Edmund breathes in, and the scents layer one upon the other like lines of gentle poetry. Breathing out, he feels them drift outward into the room, a shared exhalation that seems to calm even the shelves themselves. He rises slowly, allowing the woolen blanket to slide from his shoulders and rest over the chair's back. Moving into the aisles, the air changes with each step. The scents of different corners reveal themselves like subtle personalities here. A cluster of leather-bound volumes giving off their earthy fragrance. There, a row of cloth bindings that smell faintly of dust and ink. Further along, the cool scent of stone, where the wall meets the riverbank outside. His hand hovers over a row of volumes. When he selects one, the spine, soft as suede, releases a gentle exhalation as it leaves the shelf. Opening the book, Edmund bends closer and breathes in. The fragrance is paper dry, touched with hints of vanilla and the delicate mustiness of thyme. He smiles, recognizing it as the smell of patience pages that have waited for decades without complaint. Returning the book, he notices a small table near the wall. On it rests a ceramic bowl filled with dried lavender sprigs. Their color has faded to gray violet, but their perfume endures. He lifts the bowl to his face. The scent is subtle yet insistent floral at first, then herbal, almost medicinal, then fading into calm. He inhales deeply, lets it fill his lungs, and lowers the bowl again. His fingertips carry the lavender's memory, even after he has set it down. Edmund wanders further into the shop, pausing at a narrow window where a draught of night air carries the river's presence. Water itself has no smell, yet it brings with it the cool mineral breath of stone, the green dampness of moss, and the faint metallic trace of iron-rich soil. He inhales, and the freshness sharpens his awareness before blending back into the warmer fragrances of wood and smoke. He returns to the hearth. The fire has shifted slightly, and with it comes a brighter note of resin pine sap, released by the heat, mingling with the oak's steady perfume. The room smells layered and alive. Chamomile, lavender, cedar smoke, moss, paper. Each takes a turn leading. None insists. Pouring himself another cup of tea, Edmund lifts the cup close and inhales. The floral note of chamomile hovers at the edge of the steam, joined by the golden warmth of honey that clings to the spoon. The smell is comfort, distilled, gentle light, forgiving. He sips, and the flavor confirms the aroma, sweet, mellow, carrying its calm from the tip of his tongue into his chest. For a time, he reads again, but his focus drifts not to words, but to fragrance. The book in his lap exhales a powdery, woody perfume each time a page turns. The blanket over his shoulders releases a faint lanolin warmth as it heats against his body. Even the rug at his feet contributes a hint of wool, earthier and denser than the blanket. All around him, smell is as present as sound and equally soothing. After a while, Edmund rises again. In a wooden box beneath one shelf, he finds a collection of old postcards. He lifts the lid, and immediately a soft cardboard fragrance escapes, tinged with ink and adhesive that have mellowed over decades. He takes one card from the stack. On its front is a watercolor of the river blue, faded to gray. On the back, handwriting in sepia ink fills the space. He breathes in, and the card carries the memory of post offices and travel of ink that once was wet and is now only shadow. He replaces it gently, allowing the fragrance to return to its companions. Edmund notices how each movement stirs the air. With each step, a subtle draft carries new layers of aroma lavender from the table cedar, from the paneling leather, from the bindings. He thinks of fragrance as a kind of invisible map guiding him through the bookstore, even with his eyes half closed. He returns to the chair and pulls the blanket close again. The wool has grown warm from the fire, releasing a softened, earthy smell that comforts him further. He draws in another breath, noting how the fragrance of smoke has deepened as the logs have burned lower. Closing his eyes, Edmund reflects. Smell is the most faithful companion of memory. A single fragrance can draw forth a day from decades past. A voice long silent, a place unseen for years. Tonight, each fragrance here opens not to the past, but to the present itself, reminding him that memory is not only behind us, but also in this very moment. Each aroma is a doorway, and passing through requires nothing but breath. The teacup has cooled slightly, and the aroma of chamomile is softer now, less floral, more earthy. The honey lingers as a faint sweetness in the air. Edmund sets the cup down, watching the thin steam vanish. He notices that the room itself seems to breathe. The shelves exhale paper. The fire exhales smoke. The window inhales river air, and the lavender whispers its balance into the mix. For several minutes, he does nothing but breathe with the room. Inhale paper smoke cedar. Exhale honey lavender wool. The scents overlap and shift like tides, none ever vanishing completely, each returning when the air stirs again. He marks his place with the brass leaf bookmark and lets the book close gently. The cover meets itself with a soft puff of air. Instead of reading, he lets his attention settle fully on fragrance. The scents are like invisible threads, weaving a second blanket around his body, lighter than wool, yet no less warming. The night outside deepens, but inside the aromas assure him that all is well. A breeze drifts through the transom window, carrying the river's damp breath across his cheek. It mingles with the fire's warm smoke, creating a balance of cool and warm. He breathes it in deeply, savoring the way contrast itself can be soothing when it is this gentle. Edmund leans back and closes his eyes again. Thoughts drift into soft reflections. He considers how every scent has its own patience. Lavender has waited in its bowl for months, still offering calm. Books have waited for decades, still releasing their quiet perfume. Smoke rises and fades, but in its fading gives the air a sweetness that lingers. Even chamomile blossoms, steeped in water, offer their final gift by fragrance before they are spent. Time, he realizes, is never lost. It is carried in these small, invisible ways. The blanket hugs his shoulders more closely. The fire burning lower sends up a last round of resinous fragrance before it settles into embers. The shelves continue to exhale their paper scent. The lavender persists in its subtle insistence, and the river continues to send its damp mineral breath through the open window. Edmund allows his breathing to slow, further longer in and longer out, letting the scents arrive and depart without effort. He notices how his body responds. Muscles softening, heartbeat loosening, jaw unclenching. Smell becomes the bridge between body and mind, both carried into the same rhythm. He thinks of the bookstore itself as a living thing with its own fragrance. Its breath is this mixture of smoke, paper, wood, and tea. Its voice is the crackle and hush of the fire, the whisper of pages, the murmur of the river. And in this moment, Edmund feels himself part of the same being, his breath joining the room's breath, his stillness mirroring its patience. Minutes drift by without need for counting. The scents remain shifting gently in prominence like a choir, where different voices step forward for a line before blending back into harmony. Edmund feels no need to rise, no need to act. Breathing is enough. Listening is enough. The room completes the rest. The night deepens gently, and the bookstore responds by becoming even softer, as if the walls themselves know how to settle into rest. Edmund lets his eyes wander across the room before closing them again, shifting his focus now to touch the way every surface, every texture carries its own story of comfort. The woolen blanket is the first to speak. Its fibers brush against his skin with a gentle scratch that is not unpleasant, but grounding, a reminder of warmth and presence. When he adjusts it slightly higher over his shoulders, the fabric whispers as it moves, releasing the faintest creak from the chair's leather arms. Beneath him, the cushion molds around his body, the fabric giving way, then holding firm like a friend, learning your shape and promising not to let go. Edmund slides a hand across the armrest. The wood has been polished by decades of use, smooth in some places, faintly ridged in others. His fingertips trace the lines where the varnish has thinned, revealing the natural grain beneath. It feels alive, as though the tree still remembers its seasons of growth, now repurposed into this calm moment of rest. He takes up the teacup, still warm, though the tea within is cooling. The porcelain is smooth and slightly thinner at the rim, warming more quickly there, while the handle holds the last of the kettle's heat. His thumb circles the curve of the cup, finding a tiny flaw in the glaze, a small imperfection that makes it dearer. When he sips, he notices the change, the liquid now cooler, silkier, flowing across his tongue with ease. He sets the cup down the saucer, answering with its small, round click, and his fingers brush against the brass spoon. Cool metal. Then a quick memory of heat, where it stirred honey minutes before. Edmund rises and decides to explore the shelves with his hands. He lets his palm glide over the spines, one after another. Cloth feels soft and dry, threadbare at the edges. Leather feels warmer, yielding slightly with the faint stickiness of its aged polish. Cardboard bindings carry the grain of paper, a slight resistance to the touch. Each one is unique, yet together they form a landscape of texture, as if the shelves are mountains and valleys beneath his hands. He pauses at one book, heavier than the rest. Pulling it forward, the cover resists slightly, then yields. He balances its weight in his hands. The cloth is rougher than expected, the edges fraying. He opens it, and the pages are thick, almost woolly, beneath his fingertips. Turning them is not just an action, but a sensation, edges rough against the side of his thumb. Smooth faces, sliding across one another like silk. He closes it carefully, and returns it, the spine sliding back into place with a muffled thud. On the desk nearby rests a quill in an inkwell. The feather has long since faded, its tip never dipped in decades, but Edmund picks it up. The shaft is surprisingly strong, smooth, yet lined a mix of fragility and firmness. He rolls it between his fingers, appreciating its resilience. He sets it back gently, careful not to disturb the thin film of dust that has settled beneath. Edmund moves toward the window. The sill is cool stone, rough to the touch, a pleasing contrast to the polished wood. He places both palms on the sill and leans forward slightly. The coolness seeps into his skin and his chest, reminding him of the river just beyond. A breeze carries in faint dampness that beads faintly against his knuckles, disappearing almost as quickly as it arrives. He lingers, enjoying the balance between warmth from the fire behind and the coolness of stone ahead. He turns back toward the hearth. The poker rests nearby its handle, embossed with faint ridges. He lifts it once more, noticing its cool weight, and adjusts a log. The resistance of the wood is firm, but gives way at the right pressure, shifting with a satisfying scrape. Sparks leap briefly unseen, but felt as a brief warmth on his forearm. He places the poker back carefully, feeling the vibration as metal meets iron. When Edmund sits again, he pulls the blanket tighter, smoothing it across his lap. The wool yields in folds heavier, where it gathers lighter, where it stretches. He runs his hands over it, absent-mindedly tracing the weave. Each line of fiber is a path, each intersection a meeting. He feels the warmth of the fire settling into the blanket, making it smell faintly of lanolin, softening the texture further. He leans his head back against the chair. The wood there is slightly cooler, harder, reminding him of posture. He shifts slightly, and the chair groans its friendly reply, wood against wood, nothing sharp. His hair brushes the fabric of the cushion, each strand catching lightly, then releasing. The sensation is small, but in this quiet, it matters. Edmund lifts the brass leaf bookmark from the table. Its edges are smooth, where many fingers have touched, but the veins etched into it are sharper, precise. He balances it in his palm, running a fingertip along the ridges, feeling each groove. It is cool and heavy for its size, grounding in a way only metal can be. He sets it back down gently, noticing how the table's surface is smoother where objects have been placed. Often, the polish deepened by repetition. His thoughts drift to the nature of touch itself. Every texture holds memory wool that remembers sheep and shepherd's wood, that remembers forests, leather that remembers fields, stone that remembers rivers, paper that remembers trees. By touching them, he feels connected not only to the bookstore, but to the lives these objects once lived. Touch is a bridge across time, gentle and unassuming, yet steady as the fire. He pours another small cup of tea, now lukewarm, and holds it in both hands. The warmth has faded, but the porcelain still carries a faint heat at its core. It is enough. The smoothness of the cup encourages him to cradle it longer than needed, savoring its roundness, its simplicity. Placing it down, Edmund leans forward and rests his elbows on his knees. His hands dangle loosely, fingertips brushing the rug. The rug is thick, its fibers springing back under pressure. He presses lightly, noticing the difference between the surface and the denser weave below. The sensation travels upward, calming his arms, slowing his breath. He shifts back and allows his hands to explore the chair again. The grain in the armrest is different in each direction, smoother along the length, rougher across. He follows both slowly until his fingers memorize the pattern. It is like tracing the lines of a map with no destination but endless places to pause. Edmund closes his eyes, relying entirely on touch. The blanket is soft against his skin, the chair firm beneath the cup, smooth beside the fire, warm before the rug, plush below the air, cool at his cheek. Each layer supports the next. He realizes that touch is not only about contact, but about contrast. The way warmth feels warmer because of cool stone. The way softness feels softer because of polished wood. Balance is built through variety, and here every variety is kind. Minutes pass uncounted. The bookstore cradles him as much through touch as through sound and smell. His body once restless, now feels entirely placed, entirely known. The evening has grown darker outside, yet within the bookstore, the light feels richer, not dimmer. Edmund lifts his head and lets his eyes open fully, welcoming the quiet glow. Sight becomes the guiding sense now. The fire is the first thing to notice. Its glow has shifted from tall orange flames to lower pools of ember light. Deep cherry red coals breathe steadily, brightening when a faint breeze curls up the chimney. Each flicker paints the hearth bricks in patterns of gold and rust. Shadows climb up the walls like soft ink strokes, never sharp, always rounded. The fireplace screen catches the glow, its mesh glittering with hundreds of tiny stars. Edmund lets his gaze wander to the shelves. Their wooden frames gleam in places where lamplight pools, while the depths between the rows remain muted like forest paths at twilight. Spines of books line up in muted greens, browns and faded blues. Their lettering has softened gold leaf, now dulled to honey, black ink, to charcoal. Some lean slightly, creating gentle angles that suggest patience rather than neglect. The lamplight is steady. Linen shades filter it into warmth, a golden wash that blurs hard edges. Around each lamp, a halo floats, soft and comforting. Dust motes drift lazily in these halos, visible only when they pass through, then disappearing back into the air. Edmund notices one float upward, carried by the warmth of the fire, before fading into the dimness of the rafters. On the table, the porcelain cup gleams faintly. Its glaze reflects amber light in curves, while the spoon nearby offers a sharper glint of brass. The brass leaf bookmark catches the glow, as well veins etched clearly in contrast, then fading back into shadow. Every surface seems to choose how much light to keep and how much to release. Edmund rises and steps toward the far shelves. His eyes adjust as he moves away from the fire. Here, the light is dimmer, yet enough to make out outlines. He passes rows of books that vary in height and color, none bright, all softened by years. A few titles remain legible, their lettering carrying echoes of other centuries. Others have lost their words on the spine entirely. Their identities now. Private secrets shared only if one opens them. He pauses at a framed picture leaning against the wall. The frame is wooden, carved with delicate swirls that have collected dust in their grooves. The image is a watercolor of the river, painted in pale washes of blue and gray. The river curves gently, trees bend toward it, and a bridge crosses in the distance. The colors have faded, but the softness adds to its dreamlike quality. Edmund gazes at it until the painting seems almost to ripple like the water it depicts. Returning to the hearth, he stands for a moment and looks outward through the window. Beyond the glass, the night sky rests over the river. The moon has risen faintly behind a gauze of clouds, turning the water into liquid silver. Reflections shift and quiver, repeating the lantern glow from the bookstore window. The riverbank is darker silhouettes of trees bending slightly in the breeze. The sight feels endless, yet contained, as if the world outside wishes to remain gentle in respect for the stillness within. Edmund sits again and turns his gaze to smaller details. The rug beneath his feet holds patterns faded from their original dye. Once perhaps it was deep red and navy, now softened to rust and slate. The lines have blurred into one another like old memories that still retain shape even as their edges dissolve. The teapot rests on its trivet, its surface matte in the shadows, but gleaming faintly where lamplight strikes. He sees a tiny crackle in the glaze, not damage, but a map of time's passage. The cozy knit in soft cream yarn is folded nearby its fibers, catching light in tiny threads of gold. On the hearth's mantel sits a clock. Its face glimmers faintly under the lamplight, numbers dark but softened by the glass that covers them. The hands have moved, though Edmund has not tracked them. He notices how slowly they cross each shift, like the blink of a drowsy eye. The pendulum beneath swings silently, its golden reflection rising and falling like the breath of the bookstore itself. He closes his eyes briefly, then reopens them to test how sight feels after absence. Light floods in more gently now, reminding him of how tender vision can be. Shadows are not enemies here, but companions. They soften every corner cloak, every shelf in rest. Even the rafters above are hidden, giving the ceiling the illusion of being infinite. Edmund reflects that sight, like touch and smell, carries its own form of patience. What he sees tonight is not meant to dazzle, but to ease. Colors are muted shapes, rounded movements slow. He realizes that brightness would be too much here. Dimness is a kindness. He picks up the book he had closed earlier and studies its cover. The cloth is bottle green, but in this light, it appears closer to gray, softened by shadows. The spine bears a faded line of gold, more suggestion than script. Opening it, he gazes at the pages. The paper has yellowed with time, but the text remains legible dark ink that has not given up its duty. Each page is its own landscape, fields of cream and black, where eyes can wander without hurry. Edmund reads a paragraph aloud in his mind, then lifts his eyes to the room again. The fire glows more brightly in contrast. The lamplight steadies. Shadows shift, as though they too are listening. Sight is not only reception, but reflection. What he sees, he also shares, sending it back into the air in unspoken appreciation. He places the book aside and gazes at the flames once more. Tiny tongues of orange still rise, licking gently at the wood. The embers glow deeper red, a pomegranate seeds clustered in pockets of heat. Occasionally, one bursts faintly, sending a flicker of light that leaps across the hearth. Each spark is brief, but the afterimage lingers behind his eyes like a soft echo. He allows his gaze to blur. The outlines of the room soften, further objects dissolving into patches of light and shadow. The bookshelves become tall silhouettes. The chair becomes a darker shape surrounded by glow. The entire room becomes a painting, strokes of amber and gray, blending without edges. Edmund breathes and lets the vision carry him. Through the window, he notices the moon breaking free of its cloud cover for a moment. Its silver light stretches across the river, sharper than the lamplight, yet still calm. The reflection breaks gently with the water's movement. He leans closer, letting his eyes follow the shimmer until it meets the horizon. Then the clouds move again, dimming the light, returning the world to shadow. The transition feels like the slow closing of eyelids, a visual sigh. Edmund leans back, gaze lifting to the ceiling beams. Their lines run parallel, dark against the paler wood above. Cobwebs hang delicately in corners, shimmering in the lamplight. They are not intrusions here, but ornaments, threads of time woven gently into the room. His eyes rest there for a long moment, watching nothing move, finding peace in stillness. The bookstore offers endless small sights. If one knows how to look, the brass of the poker glowing faintly in the firelight, the uneven edge of a book where a page was once torn, the gentle sway of dust in the air, the pattern of shadow where the rug folds under the chair leg. Each detail once noticed becomes a companion. None demands attention, but each rewards it. Edmund allows his eyes to close again, keeping the after images behind his lids. Fire lamp, river, moon, all glow together even in memory. Sight continues, even in darkness, a softened vision that carries him further toward rest. The night has settled deeper, and the river outside hums steadily, its voice softened by distance. Inside, the air is thick with warmth, filled with scents of wood smoke and paper. Edmund lets his eyes rest, turning instead to another sense, the subtle world of taste. On the low table, the teacup waits porcelain cool against the lamplight. The liquid inside has cooled too, but Edmund lifts it anyway. He takes a sip, and the chamomile greets his tongue with a gentle floral whisper. The honey, though faint now, lingers like a memory. Its sweetness clings to the edges of the mouth, not insistent, but patient. He swallows, and the flavor travels downward, leaving behind the comfort of warmth more imagined than real. Edmund sets the cup down, then pours again from the teapot. This time, he notices the way the steam carries flavor before it even touches the tongue. The aroma alone suggests sweetness and calm. He lifts the cup close, inhales, then drinks more slowly. The first contact is mild, almost watery, yet beneath it remains the essence of blossoms steeped long into the evening. The taste feels less about intensity and more about suggestion, like words murmured softly in a language only half understood. He reflects on how flavor is often strongest, not in its sharpness, but in its gentleness. Chamomile is the kind of flower that comforts by absence, no bitterness, no sharpness, only ease. On the table sits a small jar of honey, its lid slightly askew. Edmund opens it and dips the spoon inside. The honey clings thick and golden, reluctant to leave its home. He lets a drop fall onto his tongue. It spreads with immediate sweetness, rich and full. Unlike the tea honey, is bold, yet its boldness is round without edges. It reminds him of sunlight, bright, nourishing, but never harsh. He stirs a little into his cup, watching the ribbons dissolve into amber swirls. The act itself tastes of patience. He takes another sip. Now the chamomile is transformed. The honey lifts it, softening what was fading, renewing the floral with sweetness. Edmund notices how the flavors meet the flower and the nectar, neither overpowering the other, but joining like two voices in harmony. The taste becomes something new, warmth that touches not only the mouth, but the memory. He remembers without urgency other evenings with tea. Different tables, different books, different fires. Yet each taste has carried the same quiet message. Slow down, breathe. Let the moment steep as tea steeps. The thought tastes as real as the honey itself. Edmund sets the cup aside and leans back in the chair. His tongue still carries traces of sweetness. He runs it lightly over his teeth, noticing how the honey clings unwilling to depart too soon. The firelight flickers, and he imagines he can taste the air, too. Smoke faintly metallic warmth, carrying a flavor like roasted wood. He breathes through his mouth and lets the air brush his tongue, tasting dryness and dampness, together a curious balance of hearth and river. After a while, he rises and wanders toward the shelf where a small tin rests. He remembers leaving it there weeks ago, filled with lozenges of peppermint. He opens the tin, and the scent rushes up sharp but kind. He places one in his mouth. Coolness spreads immediately, cutting through the sweet heaviness of honey. The contrast wakes his palate, though softly. He lets the lozenge rest against his tongue, dissolving slowly. The cool mint lingers, pairing with the chamomile still lingering. Two opposites now share the same space, sweet and sharp, warm and cool, and they balance one another perfectly. The peppermint makes him more aware of the river's air drifting through the window. The coolness outside and the coolness on his tongue mirror one another. He smiles at the symmetry, then sits again by the fire, savoring the dissolving lozenge until it fades completely. The aftertaste is clarity itself, like breathing through fresh linen. On the table beside him lies a small parcel of dried fruit, apricots, figs, dates that he remembers setting aside earlier in the season. He unwraps the cloth, gently exposing the pieces to the lamplight. The apricot is chewy, tangy, sweet. He bites into it slowly, letting the flavor release in stages. First sharp, then mellow, then a final floral echo. The fig is grainier tiny seeds pressing against his teeth, each bite earthy and grounding. The date darker carries a syrupy richness that lingers long after swallowing. Each fruit offers its own chapter, yet together they read like a single story, sunlight captured, stored, and shared on this quiet evening. Edmund reflects on how taste is not only about the mouth, but also about memory. Each fruit recalls summer orchards, buzzing bees, long afternoons of ripening. Honey recalls the work of hives, countless wings, laboring towards sweetness. Tea recalls blossoms in a field, gathered and dried under gentle skies. By tasting, he partakes not only in food, but in the passage of seasons themselves. He chews another piece of apricot and feels the tang awaken his mouth. He sips tea to balance it, the honey soothing the fruit's brightness. He notices how flavors complement one another, weaving a tapestry rather than competing. He thinks of how people too can meet this way. Different strengths, different tones, but harmony when approached gently. The fire glows more steadily, now embers brightening as the log burns lower. Edmund imagines tasting the fire as well, not literally, but in the way warmth itself can feel flavored. The air tastes richer when wood burns, carrying hints of resin and char. He breathes with his mouth slightly open, and the flavor is there, subtle, smoky grounding. It pairs with the sweetness lingering from honey, creating a contrast he hadn't expected, but welcomes. Another sip of tea, another bite of fig. Each action is slow, deliberate. Each swallow carries calm deeper. The room becomes a feast, not of abundance, but of sufficiency. Nothing is excessive. Everything is enough. Taste becomes a way of affirming presence, proof that you are here in this moment alive and cared for. Edmund places the remaining fruit back in its cloth and folds it neatly. He places the parcel on the table and leans back once more. He runs his tongue over his teeth again, finding traces of sweetness and tang smoke and coolness. All remain blending into a quiet balance. Closing his eyes, he reflects taste is often fleeting, yet in its fleetingness lies its gift. It insists on presence. You cannot taste yesterday or tomorrow, only now. Chamomile, honey, peppermint fruit, all belong to this moment, and this moment only. Their impermanence makes them precious. Their passing as gentle as the turning of a page. He breathes again, mouth open slightly, and tastes nothing but the air. Yet even air has flavor here. Fire-warmed, river-cooled, book-dusted. He smiles at the thought that even silence can have a taste subtle and tender. He rests deeper into the chair content. The night has drawn itself more deeply around the bookstore. Outside, the river murmurs steadily, never louder or softer, simply constant. Inside, the fire's glow is lower now, but the rhythm of the flames continues, a dance that slows but never stops. Edmund shifts in his chair, noticing how even the smallest movements create ripples of comfort. He begins with his breath, the most natural rhythm of all. Inhale, exhale. Each cycle feels like a rocking motion, invisible but felt. His shoulders rise slightly, then fall. The blanket adjusts over him, its folds settling with his body. This motion, repeated without thought, becomes the metronome of the evening. Edmund sets the teacup aside and leans forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped loosely. The posture change feels like a reset. Muscles stretch, and contract in slow sequence, reminding him that stillness is never total. The body always shifts, always sways, even when the mind feels still. He rocks gently once or twice, not out of restlessness, but for the pleasure of the sway. Rising slowly, he feels the transfer of weight from chair to floor. His feet press against the rug firm but cushioned. Each step toward the shelf is deliberate, the rhythm of heel and toe like a quiet percussion. The floorboards respond with muted creaks, adding their voice to the pattern. He moves without hurry, each step its own sentence. At the shelf, he reaches upward. The stretch lengthens his arms, pulls gently at his back, and lifts his chest. The movement feels like greeting. He selects a book and lowers it carefully, cradling its weight. Returning to the chair, he notices how the book's heft balances against his own body, how the slow act of sitting bends his knees, lowers his center, and returns him to stillness. He opens the book and turns a page. The action itself is a rhythm. Thumb presses paper, resists, paper yields. A soft hush follows. He repeats the motion again and again, not reading much, but listening to the rhythm of movement. Turn, hush, rest. Each page becomes part of a sequence, a lullaby in motion. Edmund sets the book aside and decides to tend the fire. He lifts the poker, the weight pulling slightly at his wrist. He kneels, knees pressing into the rug, hands steady as he nudges a log. The log shifts, settles, and releases sparks. He leans back, places the poker aside, and rises. Each part of the action is simple, yet together they feel like a ritual, a small choreography repeated countless times by others before him. He pours another cup of tea. Lift the teapot, tilt the wrist. Watch the stream arc into porcelain. Straighten, replace the pot stir with the spoon in small circles. Each gesture is measured, careful, precise. The cup lifts to his lips, tilts, lowers, swallow, place down. These small cycles of movement, repeated through the evening, create their own rhythm as steady as breath. Edmund stretches his legs and lets his feet rest on the rug. Toes press gently, curling. then relaxing. He enjoys the pressure, the way fibers spring back. He shifts his ankles, rolls them slowly, listening to the muted creaks of bone and sinew. The body too plays its own music, quiet and reassuring. Leaning back, he clasps his hands over his stomach. Fingers interlace, then shift, then interlace again in a new pattern. He notices how the motion of weaving and unweaving fingers mirrors the fire's flicker, always the same, never identical. The rhythm soothes him not because of its novelty, but because of its predictability. He stands again, just to walk the perimeter of the room. His pace is unhurried, each step cushioned by the rug, each turn gradual. He circles the shelves, trails a hand across spines, pauses at the window to gaze at the silver river. Then he returns to the chair. The circuit feels like a dance designed only for him, familiar and endlessly repeatable. He sits once more, lifts the blanket, and folds it over his lap. Folding is its own rhythm, lift, drape, smooth. The weight settles evenly, warmth balanced across him. He strokes the fabric absent-mindedly, tracing lines in its weave, repeating the gesture until it becomes as natural as breathing. Edmund leans forward to place the brass leaf bookmark back into the book. The action is slow open, cover slide metal between pages, close gently. He taps the book once with his fingertips, a soft percussion that completes the act. Small rituals of placement and replacement remind him of the quiet discipline of order. The clock on the mantel ticks faintly, and Edmund begins to notice how his movements match it. Each sip of tea, each page turned, each stretch of arms happens in rhythm with the pendulum's swing. Even the fire seems to join its pops and crackles, falling into time. The room is not silent, but orchestrated, every movement part of the same score. Edmund closes his eyes and begins a gentle rocking in the chair. Forward a fraction, back a fraction. The wood creaks softly in reply, a duet between body and furniture. The rocking is steady, not pronounced, and quickly becomes hypnotic. He imagines the river outside rocking in time, its current swaying the reeds along its banks. He thinks about how movement need not be grand to be meaningful. A shift of breath, a turn of a page, a sip of tea. These are the small dances of living. They require no audience, no applause. Their purpose is not display, but comfort, not progress, but presence. Edmund opens his eyes and lets them follow the fire again. The flames rise and fall, a choreography without choreographer. Embers collapse inward, sparks leap outward, ash drifts upward. The movement is endless, yet never rushed. He realizes that to watch fire is to watch the purest rhythm, chaotic in detail, steady in essence. He mirrors the fire's rhythm in his breathing. Inhale as flames rise. Exhale as embers fall. The synchronization is soothing, as if his body has been invited into the fire's slow dance. Minutes pass like this breath-matching flame-body joining room. When he drinks again, he notices the motion of swallowing, the gentle rise and fall of throat muscles, the liquid traveling downward. He marvels at how even swallowing can be a ritual, something most often ignored, but tonight honored. He takes another sip just to repeat the rhythm. Cup lift, tilt, swallow, set down. A cycle as calming as the pendulum swing. He shifts the book to his lap again and runs his fingers along the edges of the pages. Flipping through quickly creates a breeze, a flutter that ends in silence. Then he does it again, slower this time. Each rhythm is different, yet both satisfy. He realizes that rhythm itself, more than the content, carries calm. The room has become a concert of rhythms. The pendulum, the fire, the river, his breath, the rocking chair, the sip of tea, the turn of pages. None is loud, none competes, but together they create a harmony of movement. Edmund leans back, fully closing his eyes. He allows himself to sway with these rhythms, body lighter, mind quieter. The movements may be small, but they weave a net of comfort, holding him securely. In this rhythm, there is no past and no future, only now. Only the motion of living softened into lullaby. The fire has lowered to embers, now glowing steady and red. The river keeps its rhythm beyond the window, unchanging, constant. Edmund sits quietly in the chair, woolen blanket drawn once more over his shoulders. and allows his mind to soften into reflection. He gazes at the cup on the table. The tea has cooled completely, yet it feels symbolic, not wasted. He thinks about how each sip earlier in the night was both nourishment and ritual moments of pause that could never be repeated in exactly the same way. Tea, like time, only exists in the present. Each swallow was a small ceremony of attention, and so even now, the empty cup carries meaning, a reminder that nothing needs to last forever to matter. Edmund closes his eyes, resting them in the dim glow. He reflects on the patience of the room itself. Everything here seems willing to wait. Books waiting for hands, logs waiting for flame chairs, waiting for someone to rest in them. None of these objects rushes. None demands. Their patience invites his own. He feels his breathing stretch longer, his body falling into the same timeless rhythm. He wonders how often in life people overlook the ordinary rituals that shape their days. Making tea, turning pages, adjusting blankets, listening to the hum of a clock. These things seem small, but perhaps they are the very essence of living. They are what carry us unnoticed through the hours. Tonight, each ritual has revealed itself in detail, reminding him that peace is not found in grand gestures, but in these modest acts repeated with care. He opens his eyes again and looks at the shelves. Some volumes have not been touched in decades, yet they remain here steadfast. They do not worry about being forgotten. They simply are. They exist, patient, complete in their being. Edmund thinks about how humans too might learn from books, to stand quietly, to age with dignity, to let time do its work without protest. The clock ticks faintly on the mantel. Its hands move, but in no hurry. Time here does not feel like something to measure against. It feels like a companion walking at his side. Edmund reflects that outside the world might move quickly. Bustling streets, deadlines, expectations. But here time bends. It slows not by force, but by consent. He realizes he does not need more hours. He simply needs deeper ones. His gaze returns to the fire. Embers glow steadily, sometimes brightening as a log shifts sometimes dimming before flaring again. He thinks of how life too holds these rhythms. We do not burn at full flame forever. We glow, fade, glow again. And there is beauty in each stage. The embers are no less beautiful than the flames. In fact, their steadiness is more soothing. Edmund adjusts the blanket on his lap, smoothing it with slow strokes. The fabric's weight reminds him that presence itself is enough. He reflects on how much of life is spent chasing outcomes, chasing recognition, chasing moments we think we must capture. Yet tonight shows him that stillness is not empty, but full. The fire, the river, the books, they are full of meaning without striving. Perhaps so is he. He remembers a thought that patience is not waiting for something to arrive, but accepting the moment exactly as it is. Tonight, there is nothing to arrive. He is already within the moment. The tea has steeped, the fire has burned, the books have whispered. All that is required now is to be here. He rises and walks slowly to the window. Outside, the moon glimmers faintly through thin clouds. Its reflection on the river trembles but does not break. He places his hand on the cool sill and gazes outward. The sight reminds him that time flows like water, always moving, yet always present in each ripple. He does not feel sadness in this thought, only calm. Returning to the chair, he lowers himself, gently noticing how each movement becomes part of the reflection. Sitting is not just sitting, it is choosing presence. Placing the blanket over his lap is not just warming, it is acknowledging comfort. Each action, no matter how small, can carry philosophy within it. Edmund considers the meaning of memory. He realizes that he will not recall every detail of this night. Perhaps not the exact page he read, or the exact crackle of the fire, but he will remember the feeling, the sense of being safe, unhurried, nurtured. Feelings outlast facts. Perhaps that is why rituals matter. They anchor feelings we wish to return to long after the details fade. He thinks about the books again. Each one holds thousands of words, yet in silence, they offer something more profound, the quiet assurance of continuity. Just as people carry their stories within, so too do these books. And yet, neither the books nor the people need to be read every moment to retain their worth. Value exists even in rest. The thought comforts him. He leans back, eyes half closed, and imagines himself as one of the volumes on the shelf, simply existing, no urgency, no performance, just presence. The idea tastes sweet in his mind, like honey dissolving into tea. The river outside continues its song. Edmund listens and reflects on how rivers never demand attention, yet they shape entire landscapes. Their work is quiet, steady, almost invisible day by day. He wonders if human lives might be like that too, shaping the world not through noise, but through constancy, through small repeated gestures of kindness and patience. He opens the book on his lap again, not to read, but to hold. The weight feels grounding, the pages cool against his fingers. He realizes that even holding a book without reading is meaningful. It is a reminder of possibility, of stories waiting, of knowledge resting. Not every potential must be fulfilled now. Some may wait. That too is enough. Edmund breathes deeply. He reflects that much of life's stress comes from believing we must always be doing, achieving, moving. Yet tonight, the bookstore reminds him of another truth, that being is already sufficient. The fire does not strive to be more than flame. The river does not strive to be more than flow. The books do not strive to be more than words bound together. And he does not need to strive to be more than himself. He thinks of patience again. Not patience as endurance, but patience as trust. Trust that the fire will warm, that the river will continue, that the morning will come without his worrying it into being. Trust that presence itself is worthy. His eyes close fully now. Thoughts come more slowly, like leaves drifting in water. Each one floats past without effort. He watches them without clinging memories of other nights, images of people he has loved. Fragments of sentences from books long read. Each appears, then passes. None need be held. The present is enough. Minutes pass uncounted. Edmund remains wrapped in blanket and thought soothed by the fire, the river, the lamplight. He realizes that philosophy does not always live in heavy texts or complicated arguments. Sometimes it lives in the act of sipping tea, of smoothing a blanket, of listening to fire. Wisdom can be quiet. Wisdom can be small. And perhaps that is when it is truest. The embers glow steadily. The clock ticks softly. The river flows on. Edmund rests within these truths, not needing to change them, only to receive them. His reflections merge with the sounds and sensations of the room, forming a single awareness that life in its simplest details is already whole. The night is now at its deepest, and the old bookstore rests in full harmony with the world outside. The fire has burned low, reduced to a bed of glowing embers. They pulse softly like a heartbeat, rising and falling in dim red. Each glow seems to breathe exhaling warmth that fills the room with one final round of comfort. Edmund remains in the high-backed chair, wool blanket across his lap. His body feels heavier now pleasantly, so as though the chair has gathered him into itself. He shifts once, just to nestle deeper, and then stills. The bookstore around him is no longer just a place. It feels like a companion, a presence that holds him with steady patience. He gazes at the embers. Their glow is less a flame than a memory of flame. And he finds that thought tender. Memories too can be like this soft glowing, sustaining warmth long after the fire of the moment has passed. He reflects that tonight will join those memories, not sharp or dramatic, but glowing quietly within him whenever he recalls the feel of tea, the sound of pages, the sight of lamplight on books. The river continues its endless murmur outside. Its rhythm is unbroken, a sound as ancient as the world itself. Edmund imagines the river carrying the night along, drifting through forests, slipping past towns, traveling onward under the moon. Yet here by the bookstore window, it feels as though the river flows only for him, a lullaby sung in water. He closes his eyes for a moment and listens. Fire river clock, all in chorus. The three sounds are enough to cradle him. The fire's crackle is warm. The river's murmur is constancy. The clock's tick is presence. Together, they form a trinity of reassurance. He lets the sound wash over him like tide. When he opens his eyes again, the lamplight has softened further. Its glow is lower now, though steady, painting the shelves in amber shadows. The books themselves seem to fade into the dimness, their spines less distinct. It is as if they too are drifting toward rest, closing their eyes in solidarity. Edmund sips once more from the cup. The tea has cooled to near lukewarm, but it still carries a whisper of chamomile and honey. The flavor is gentle, a final note rather than a full melody. He drinks it slowly, savoring not the intensity, but the farewell. When the cup is empty, he places it on the saucer and leaves it there, content that it has served its purpose. He thinks about how everything tonight has unfolded like a slow story. First sound, then smell, then touch, then sight, then taste, then movement, then thought. Each sense has had its turn, each contributing to the tapestry of rest. And now, at the end, all senses blend together, not distinct, but united. A harmony of perception, all softened into one lull. The blanket warms him steadily, weighty, yet tender. He strokes it once more, almost absent-mindedly, tracing the weave. Then he folds his hands over his stomach and lets them rest. His breathing becomes slower, deeper. He notices the way each inhale lifts the blanket slightly, and each exhale lowers it again. It feels like a dialogue, body and fabric speaking in rhythm. The clock ticks, the river flows, the fire glows. Edmund feels his mind drifting, loosening its grip on thoughts. A page rustles faintly from the book he had left half open. The sound feels like a whisper, reminding him of the stories waiting within. He imagines them continuing quietly on their own, as though the characters step forward and walk their paths while he sleeps. The thought comforts him. Stories do not vanish when left alone. They carry on patiently until he returns. He gazes once more at the window. The moon has shifted higher, its silver reflection stretched thinner across the river. The clouds have thickened, veiling it softly. The sight feels like the night drawing its own curtain, preparing the world for deeper rest. He lets his eyes linger, then close again, keeping the after-image behind his lids. Edmund reflects that endings too can be beautiful. Not dramatic or sudden, but gradual, like a fire easing into embers, like tea cooling in its cup, like a book closing at the end of a chapter. Tonight is ending in that way, each detail slowing, softening, fading into calm. He accepts the ending not with reluctance, but with gratitude. The chair supports him fully now. Its cushion remembers his weight. Its arms remember his touch. He feels less like he sits upon it and more like he has merged with it a single form of stillness. The blanket anchors him in warmth. The air strokes his cheek with its mild coolness, and the bookstore itself seems to breathe around him. He thinks once more of patience, of how each object in the room embodies it. The books wait without complaint. The fire accepts its dimming without struggle. The river flows without hurry. The clock marks time without urgency. He realizes that patience is not simply waiting. It is allowing things to be as they are. Tonight, he has allowed himself to be as he is. That he thinks is enough. The fire gives a final pop, then settles into silence. Embers continue their quiet glow, but the sound has nearly ceased. The river takes over as the dominant voice, now carrying the night onward. The clock continues its patient tick, softer than ever, but still steady. Edmund's breath aligns with both long and slow, deeper with each cycle. His mind drifts to images that are not quite dreams. A field of chamomile blossoms under morning sun. Bees gathering nectar that will become honey. A forest of trees whose wood once held leaves and now holds shelves. A river winding endlessly, always different, always the same. These images pass like lanterns, floating downstream, glimpsed and gone, leaving only their glow behind. The blanket grows heavier in his awareness, though its weight has not changed. The chair feels deeper, as if sinking into him rather than holding him. His body loosens, surrendering muscle by muscle. Hands soften, shoulders release, jaw unclenches. His breath becomes almost silent. He thinks one last reflection, that rest itself is not something to achieve, but something to receive. Like tea poured into a cup, like fire warming a room, like a river carrying its current. Rest arrives naturally when one allows it. Tonight, he has allowed. His eyelids lower fully. The lamplight blurs into darkness. The river sings softly, endlessly. The fire glows like the last ember of thought. The clock ticks, and even that sound drifts further away, as though time itself has gone to bed. Edmund slips into stillness. The bookstore remains keeping its vigil. Shelves full of stories, a hearth of embers, a river outside, all waiting patient for him to return when he wakes. For now, though nothing more is needed, the night is whole, the moment is complete. Sleep gathers him gentle as the blanket steady, as the chair constant as the river. And in that surrender, Edmund drifts fully into rest.